Left of the box. John Martinez, Sandy, you advocate for the disabled, and I appreciate that. I do remember you on TYT. One of the best comments I ever got was along those lines on one of my videos that I remember that it's like, yeah, this is why I do this. And it was a comment on a video where I was talking about people who used wheelchairs for mobility, went to a concert, and their section was like a mile away from the stage across a gravel pit and all this sort of stuff. And just their frustration of having to deal with that and the lack of assistance they had and how far away they were from the concert. And there was somebody in the comments section that said, like, this is the only place outside of a niche, YouTube channel that I've ever heard address people with disabilities and our issues. And this is the first time I felt heard. And I'm like, and that is something that I do try to bring to this, because so many people get caught up. They don't know what you don't know. People with disabilities did not benefit from CERB at all. We were denied that. And some people ran into problems because of it. And it's hard to, understand policies and how they affect all people unless you know what it's actually like living with disabilities. Because you just don't know what you don't know. Not only like, yes, my disabilities are mental health related, but I've known plenty of people with physical disabilities. I'm developing them with back issues and things of that sort. And like, a physical disability is something I think most people will live with at some point in their life, depending on how old you get. And so the idea that it's almost never acknowledged how this will affect people, because I've even mentioned it when I've called into the majority report and seeing comments in their chat about somebody like surprised that finally somebody is mentioning something about disabilities. Because all too often, even the best leftist programs tend not to mention that unless there's a specific story that focuses on it. But they don't mention things that I tend to mention, like when it comes to wildfires, when it comes to flash floods, when it comes to what happened in Florida with the hurricanes. How are people with disabilities supposed to cope with that? Like, where do they flee to, if they can flee? Like, if you're trying to flee a forest fire and you have to do that quickly, and you have any sort of disability that will hamper your mobility, you're in trouble. And then if you use a wheelchair or canes and all this sort of stuff, and you're being evacuated from an area, are the places you're going to wheelchair accessible? Is that even a consideration? Are there systems in place for people who are deaf or blind to help them in the evacuation areas? Like, those are things that are just not talked about when it comes to these broader issues. And they're seen as niche issues when they're not. Because so many people will live with a disability at some point in their life. I think it's virtually impossible at this point to not live with a disability at some point in your life, because they say by the time somebody is, 30 or 40, 40% of people have had a period with mental health issues, and that is greatly underreported. So as I say, if you're sitting in a room of people, look to the person to your left and look in the mirror. 2 of the 3 of you have had mental health issues. Because it really is, again, like, the older you get, the more likely you are to have a disability. And it's those people who tend to suffer the worst when it comes to underfunding and stuff. And the story that will never escape my mind was during COVID, when it first broke out, and in the long-term care homes, they had to call in the armed services in Canada into Ontario private long-term home care to get things under control, because things were so out of control. When they arrived, they found 26 people had died of dehydration. So those are people with disabilities unable to leave their beds, and they were neglected so severely they died of dehydration in their bed because they didn't have the ability to get out. And those stories are rarely ever covered in the news. So it's important to have that perspective. John Martinez, social anxiety disorder sucks, but hearing others speak about having it and their experiences helped me along. Makes me feel I'm not alone. Yeah. And people are, people have always been, oh, don't talk about like mental health issues and stuff. They're going to think you're crazy. I am. But I have also found, I think it's due to my autism. I just tend to be a little bit more, I overshare. But I have found when it comes to the mental health issues that has actually helped a lot of other people realize that they're not alone. And some close friends of mine get out of their shell because suddenly they realize it's like, oh, okay, it's not just me. There's other people.